Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast for HBO's Game of Thrones spin-off, House of the Dragon. I am joined by my good friend and co-worker, Luke J. Williams, to discuss our thoughts on Season 1 of House of the Dragon.
Sup?
So, Luke, before we delve into our thoughts on the show, I'm interested to hear what your expectations were going into this.
Well, after the dramatic ending of Game of Thrones.
Dramatic's one word for it.
The disappointing ending, I guess. There wasn't a lot of expectation. I feel like when you go into something like that, like when you have like that negative kind of connotation that gets sullied with it, you kind of don't want to, like it happened with Star Wars,
Yeah.
Like you watch
100%.
The Last Jedi and you're like, I don't give a shit anymore about anything that happens. And I kind of felt that same way after Game of Thrones. I was like, I don't care if I watch that ever again. I probably won't watch it ever again. I don't care about House of the Dragon. But the first trailer, super impressive. I was like, well, okay, maybe. And yeah, I don't know. Like the expectations from that, it built hype around it. I was definitely keen to watch it just from that, hoping that it would be something different with a different team. Of course, not having the same showrunners or the writers. I was like, maybe this will be a bit more exciting, maybe let's be a bit different. But yeah, I was just kind of unsure. I was optimistic, but very, very cautiously, I think.
Funnily, D&D were actually offered to be showrunners for this show. Yeah, I think it might have been before season 8, like maybe season 6 or so.
Right.
They were offered it and declined because of their Netflix deal. They wanted to focus on other things. So, yeah, I think that decision was huge for the show, because if they did this, people wouldn't have watched. I don't think I would have watched if D&D were involved.
I don't think so. I think I probably would have watched it, but I wouldn't have been excited about it. I would have had that same kind of feeling, like J.J. Abrams coming back. But they gave it to Miguel. I can't say his last name. What is it? Saponicek.
You do you, bro.
Well, he was the director of some of the best episodes of Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Hard Home, right?
Yeah, he did Hard Home. He did Battle of the Bastards too, which has its own problems, but was still quite an impressive episode. And I quite liked the way that he did all of his action scenes. That's what he was really known for in Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
He did a lot of the big battle pieces. So as a director, I was pretty for him going into this, but as a showrunner, I think he's done a pretty good job.
I don't know their names too, but I think 2 of the showrunners or 2 of the writers can't quite place the names, but they were actually working for Amazon, working on a Conan TV series. And
like Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, and they'd mapped out like a series Bible and been sending like drafts of like the first few episodes to Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And then Amazon got interested in the Lord of the Rings TV show and cancelled it on them. And then they were offered to work on House of the Dragon and went there instead. So they're laughing because the Lord of the Rings TV show hasn't been successful, and this has been a massive hit. So,
which is crazy because you have those 2 IPs. You got Game of Thrones, which was one of the biggest, probably the biggest TV show in the world when it was airing. And then fucking Lord of the Rings, which was like an intense, like an insane, like so many people love the Middle Earth, like the IP, the lore, the everything in that like world.
Lucky they got fired from the Conan job, because if Conan didn't get cancelled, we might have had a different show.
Fair.
But you actually recently rewatched all of Game of Thrones, so you went in with a slightly different approach, because it's been a while since I haven't watched any Game of Thrones since the season 8 finale. I've obviously watched like some YouTube content and stuff, but heading into this, I felt like it's been a while since I've watched something in the Game of Thrones universe and something of this kind of setting. So, were there any noticeable changes or differences between Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon that really stand out for you?
Look, it felt totally different. I hadn't watched Game of Thrones as well since it finished airing, and Brianna, my partner, she hadn't finished season 8 at all, so I was kind of keen to show her like how it like ended and the downfall of it. But what I found was like watching, because you watched House of the Dragon all at once, right? You binged it at the end.
Yeah, I watched it all in about 5 days.
Yeah. I was watching it week to week, so I had the whole like 10-week kind of process with it, and that really felt like it felt like I wanted more content. I wanted to like binge it. So I watched Game of Thrones on the off season, like when it wasn't like airing in between the episodes. Managed to finish it all before House of the Dragon ended as well. So it's quite a quick time to watch all of the 8 seasons. But it's noticeably a different show.
Yeah,
so different. Game of Thrones spent a lot of time on, in the earlier seasons at least, on their dialogue and their character building and their world building. But House of the Dragon felt probably a bit more modernized in some ways.
I think the production value was a huge factor.
They had more money, absolutely. They had way more money straight away, and you could tell in the first episode you've got Rhaenyra flying on the skies with a dragon, and we didn't see dragons until the very last episode of the first season of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So you could tell they had more money, and that's obvious because of the success of Game of Thrones. They would have been given that, and they had it. But yeah, it felt totally different. What do you think it felt like different? Do you feel like a different tonality to the show? Yeah,
it's definitely like an obvious difference between it and Game of Thrones. The budget was huge though, like that makes such a big difference, like just with what they were able to accomplish, not only with the VFX, like it didn't feel like they weren't reable to include certain scenes because they didn't have the budget to show the dragons or whatever, and just like the locations that we know from Game of Thrones, they remodeled most of them and made them look like a ton different because they had so much more freedom. Like there's a lot more like long shots in the environments because they actually were able to build like such
the whole set.
Yeah, exactly, and it looks like fantastic. I also heard so I managed to avoid pretty much all spoilers, so I went in pretty much completely blind. I didn't watch any trailers or anything outside of a few stills that I saw on Facebook and stuff. I didn't really know anything about it. All I knew that it was based on a George R.R. Martin book. I believe it was the shortest.
Fire and Blood, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's the shortest novel that he's wrote. And I honestly thought this was a miniseries. I thought this was going to be the end of it.
So, limited in it.
Yeah, I went in thinking it's a 10 episode one-off spin-off, like one and done kind of thing. Yeah. Definitely going to be at least 3 seasons.
Yeah.
At least, because...
if not more.
Yeah, like, well... if it's super successful, they might even drag it out, like, to be honest. But
season 2 was ordered and greenlit as soon as the first episode aired.
Yeah.
Like, just based on the viewership for HBO, they were like, done, it's done, with more.
Honestly, like, they should have known it was going to be successful. They should have just filmed 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same thing with Dune, you know, like, they could have just made part 1 and part 2 together and saved so much money and time, but because of that whole, like, risk factor of, is the show going to do well, you know, they kind of hold off on making that decision.
It worries me a bit, though, that kind of like model, you know, because they're waiting for it and it makes money and it does well and they're like, okay, here's another season.
Yeah.
And they're going to do that again with season 2 because people, I can tell you now, I'm super excited for when that comes out.
Well, season 2 is going to be a success, so why don't they film season 2 and season 3 together and save us all this time, because it's going to be a 2-year wait between the end of this season and season 2. And by then, like, all of the hype's going to be died down. And then, the first episode of season 2 is going to come out and they'll be like, yeah, season 3 is going to come out soon. And then they repeat the process. Like, no, just film it all at once like they did with Lord of the Rings. They filmed the whole trilogy and then they just, you know, space it out over a year.
They want to build that hype around it as well, I think. But I'm worried that they're going to milk it like they did with Game of Thrones.
Yeah, look, I don't think they will, because they are following source material. So...
right.
They can't exactly, you know, create like whole story arcs that don't exist.
Well, you know what happens when they run out of books.
Yeah, well, that is true, but they haven't run out of a book because there's only one and it's done. So
and it's got an ending to it. It's all set up and it's a prequel as well. So there's only so far that you can go with it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And the amount of like time they covered in the first season as well. What, it was like 16 years or something, just within the first season. Yeah.
I think it was like 30.
Well, they had the big 10-year skip.
Yeah. And then there was another 6-year skip.
Yeah.
And there were more than just 2 skips as well.
The first 3 episodes had like years apart on each of them. They covered so much time in that.
Yep.
So I hope they don't. Especially if they keep with that model.
I think it'll be like pretty concise. I don't see them expanding it, especially with how expensive the episodes are to make.
True.
And I think there are future spin-offs planned as well. So like, why spend all of this time milking this product when they could just make another spin-off.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of shit online about potential spin-offs and stuff they're going to do, including like a Jon Snow show, and I was like, nah, just don't, please.
Yeah, no. I don't want that.
Kit Harington needs it. He needs it.
I also read too that heading into this, like, there was some kind of article saying that they were dumbing down a lot of the like sex, nudity, violence for the show.
Yeah.
Not true. Not true at all. If anything, it's maybe a little less gratuitous than the early seasons of Game of Thrones, but in terms of like dumbing it down and making it a bit more like PG friendly, absolutely not. They didn't do that.
I kind of disagree.
You think they did?
I think they did. Yeah. So it's noticeably less sexualized.
Yes, it's less pornographic than the early seasons of Game of Thrones. But then compare it to the later seasons, it's more.
Yeah, the later seasons of Game of Thrones, for sure. But I can barely, like, how many times I saw nudity in House of the Dragon, I can barely remember it. Like, there was some in the first episode, there was, one brothel they went to there. The brothel later on in the show. But between our main characters, there was barely any nudity, barely any gratuitous sex scenes. And
That's true.
If it was done very, very artistically.
I think it was just less gratuitous. Like, Game of Thrones at times could have just been, like, it was a bit much, I think, sometimes. Like, did we need to see cock there? Probably not, Hodor comes to mind. But this one, it was like, okay, there's nudity if it makes sense in the scene. But in terms of violence, though, the violence definitely wasn't dumbed down. Like,
no, not at all.
If anything, I think they dialed it up.
Yeah, well, they get more money to work with. They can do more stuff with that. But it definitely, and you can tell pretty early on as well how violent it'll get.
Yeah.
Throughout the show, just from watching that.
Yeah, and I'm all for it. I love the violence so much.
I wish there was a bit more sexualization. I wish there was a bit more nudity. I think, yes, at some points in Game of Thrones it got too much. Like, you just got a bit desensitized to it.
Yeah.
But I think House of the Dragon could have taken a bit more risk with that. It had that, in Australia, that MA-15 rating.
Yeah.
But through all episodes. But I specifically remember most of the seasons of Game of Thrones were R18.
Yeah.
So it was definitely less in the nudity aspect and the sexualization, but yeah, I wouldn't say they dialed down the violence at all.
Yeah, which is an important thing, I think, because I think a lot of fans would have been disappointed if they really dumbed it down to be more friendly to a wider audience. So before we delve into it too much more, I want you to summarize your opinion on House of the Dragon in one sentence.
Oh, shit. You go first.
Me? Okay. That's not how this works, but...
We're breaking the mold.
I would say House of the Dragon is good, but not as good as Game of Thrones.
Okay. Look, I watched it all. I watched all the Game of Thrones again. I've seen it twice now, all the way through. I think... probably... House of the Dragon is a... worthy prequel, maybe even better than Game of Thrones.
That's a spicy take.
That is a spicy take.
That's a spicy take.
Look, registering my enjoyment of watching, like, some of the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones were beautiful. They were really well done. They had a lot of slow moments, character moments, and dialogue scenes, but sometimes that got a little... They didn't blend it as well as they could have.
Okay.
When you compare it to House of the Dragon, and you see how well they have their slow moments at some points, but they also have a lot of really interesting tension, a lot of really like cunning kind of moments, and it overall as a watching experience, I think I enjoyed season 1 of House of the Dragon more than Game of Thrones.
That's interesting. Like, you're in a better position to judge on that because you've just watched like season 1 of Game of Thrones this year. I haven't seen it in like 7 years, so I'm probably like not in a position where I can really make that comparison. But for me, I think Game of Thrones season 1 is a lot better. But it'll be interesting to see how well this season of House of the Dragon ages, because I think now everyone's kind of in that like honeymoon phase, and everyone's really appreciating it. Be interesting to see like once future seasons come out and we look back on it, like how impressive was season 1, because I actually think this will age poorly.
Really?
Yeah, I think over time people will probably see the problems of this season a bit more, which we'll get into. So let's move on to the story and characters. Okay. So overall, like trying to put a blanket, because a lot fucking happens in this show.
A lot.
Like it is a lot. What were your thoughts on the story?
I I like the story. I thought it was a very interesting kind of idea to do as many time skips as they did.
Yeah.
That, I think, helps and hinders in some ways, because there's a lot to cover from the source material. I haven't read the book. I haven't read any of the Game of Thrones books.
So there's more, apparently. I watched an interview with George R. R. Martin.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, like, the problem with adaptions and how, like, you never know when to begin. You know, like, do you start with, like, an origin story, or do you come in midway through or at the peak of their power? And I think there was, like, 40 years of history before the point of the show. Yeah, like, I believe there was...
So they omitted a lot of stuff.
Yeah, like, yeah. I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong, like, I haven't read the book, but based off the interview, he seemed to imply that, like, the beginning, like, the big event is, I guess, the birth, well, the failed birth of Viserys' firstborn son.
Yeah, Baelor?
Balon, I think it was, yeah. Like, look, we're gonna butcher all the names, so we might as well not even try it, but... yeah, like, that point that we pick up from is not the beginning of the book, I don't believe. So they had to already, like, omit some stuff. And, yeah, I'd say, like, narratively, this is a difficult show to rate. Because, for me, the time skips killed the show for me.
Well, you lost a bit of stuff, you know, like... There's a lot of moments and interactions with the characters that I wish we got to see in between the time skips.
Yeah.
That would have made more sense for some of the decisions they made and the way they acted in the episodes that we did get to see. That I wish we had a bit more backstory on for that.
And that's the thing. The time skips not only are they problematic for, like, trying to fucking follow the story, because they don't even come up, like, 6 years later. They don't even help us out. Like, they literally just expect us to realize that time has passed. And thankfully, Viserys, like, his look is a good model to figure out what
he'll
fucking
always change.
Yeah, what fucking timeline we're in. But
Damon won't. Matt Smith will say the same throughout.
Well, that's the thing. So they had the problem where they have, for the first half of the show, they have Millie Alcock playing Rhaenyra, and then they have to recast her because she ages to Emma Darcy, and that was super jarring for me, because the first 5 episodes, I'm super invested in Millie's portrayal of this character.
Me too.
Her relationships with Alicent and obviously her uncle Daemon, like, they had a lot of chemistry, and then we spend all of this time getting used to her, and then all of a sudden she's just fucking replaced by another actress. And I understand, like, it was necessary. You can't keep her playing, like, a 30, 40, 50, I don't know how old she is, but I think she's in her 40s at least by the end of season 1, or at least getting close to it, right?
I'd say so, yeah.
She can't play that age group, so it was necessary to recast, but it's super jarring, and probably the weakest. Like, there's not much they can do, because they're following source material, and books it's less jarring, right?
Yeah.
For TV, it doesn't work. It detracts.
Well, you know, they did all of that, the older actors first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those relationships, that, like, Daemon relationship and that Viserys relationship with Rhaenyra specifically, that was already, like, worked out between Emma Darcy and all those actors. And so Millie Alcock coming into it after that had to kind of put her portrayal of Rhaenyra, base it off of how Emma did it. And I think that it was probably a lot harder for her to do that.
Well, it worked. She was fantastic, and the recastings themselves, like, they're so similar.
They do. They look physically. They look so much like their younger versions.
So they did literally, like, as good as they could possibly do given the circumstances. It's just the circumstances suck, because a perfect example is, like, I think just before that major time skip, we have Kristen Cole murder someone in front of everyone, like murder a lord, and then we time skip, like, 6 years later, and we don't know what the fuck happened after that. Like, did he have to, like, go to trial? How was he not kicked out of the Kingsguard?
It was just fine.
Did Queen Alicent, like, stand up and protect him? Like, it's kind of implied, but we didn't get to see any of that. And there's so many moments like that. Like, for example, another good example, Daemon goes back, we meet his wife for the first time. He goes back to wherever she's chilling out, and then kind of gets her killed by making her fall off the horse.
Yeah, in the Erie,
Yeah, and it's kind of implied that like he finishes her off with the rock, or is that?
Yeah, well, they
imply that, but I don't think that actually happened because they just mentioned that she died from falling off the horse.
No, I straight up think that he killed her.
Yeah, well, he went there with the intention to kill her, right?
I mean, he was wearing that fucking cloak, walking around the hills like that. He absolutely was out there to kill her.
Well, we get introduced like we hear about her for like a few episodes as being this like bronze bitch. We meet her in one scene, she's dead. Next episode, he's got a wife and kids, like, and he's fucking.
That came out of nowhere.
That was so jarring for me because he's like a bachelor in love, well, not in love, but like wants to marry a prostitute, and then we're going to this, like it was.
He gave so one glance to Lena Valerian at that dinner, at that wedding scene. Yep. And the next episode, they're married. They've got 2 kids. They've got a life together out in Essos, and it's like, bro.
And not getting to see any of that is super problematic. And for me, I don't really know how you solve it. I think it's just the problem of adapting this source material.
Yeah.
I think it's just kind of unfortunate. Like Game of Thrones, right? No issues with time skips whatsoever. But this, like, they have so much to cover. The time skips are necessary. And maybe they should have went with like a slightly shorter season, like maybe an 8-episode season, and dragged it out and then had a time skip be a season 2. But I understand why they didn't do that, because if they did that, then season 2 would have ended about the same point that this season finished, and this season itself is set up. Like, pretty much nothing happens in the season. It's all set up for what's to come.
For the war, the dance of the dragons,
Exactly. Like the war only kind of like begins, like it hasn't even begun yet in this season. It's just kind of implied, like, okay, this is how the war begins from this last event that happens in episode 10.
Yeah.
And that's it. So like the whole story is built around this war that doesn't happen in season 1. So it's all set up, and the time skips are just
they hurt the setup. They really do.
It's super problematic. But like I said, there's not really much they could have done about it. So that's why I think this episode will actually age poorly. I think people will because I think moving forward we're not going to get those time skips. I would be very surprised if I think there is still time skips to come,
but not as dramatic.
It's not going to be as jarring, and I think they're going to stick with the same actors and actresses. So
there was like 3 different actors and actresses that played the kids, like at various points, That's something that really, like, the time skips really hurt for me. Like, it really decharacterized the kids.
Yeah.
Especially Damon and Lena's children. I think Baylor, and I don't even know the other one's name, but they just have no characterization for me.
No.
They don't do anything at all, really. Can't even recall them speaking at any point. They just kind of show up as set pieces a few times. And it really kind of hurts, because I feel like they're going to be integral in the wars to come. You get a bit more with Jacaerys and Luke Lucerys. Obviously because they're Rhaenyra's kids, and there's the whole controversy about their birth and
that aspect of the show was solid. I liked that.
That was awesome. Yeah.
The sparring that they did, and how Kristen Cole was like picking on them,
their teacher and stuff.
Yeah.
He just had such a disgusting like view of them because they were Rhaenyra's children, and probably a bit jealous himself.
Well, that's another aspect, right? Like in one episode we're getting Rhaenyra and Kristen, and they're like having this blossoming like affair kind of thing, right? And then the next episode they fucking hate each other.
Bro,
it's wild.
Can we talk about Kristen Cole? Let's fucking open the Kristen Cole can of worms. What the
fuck? The man that doesn't age.
Yeah, at all. I don't think his hair even grew.
Like they could have grayed his facial hair or put a bit of gray in it, something, because he looks the exact same.
The way they set him up in episode 1 is this handsome, dashing, mysterious knight. He's from a low
honorable, high morals.
Yeah.
Like he went to the queen and said, like, I admit to this. I admit to sleeping with Rhaenyra, but all I ask is please kill me, don't torture me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this character's kind of cool. And then they just fucking flip flop from that and go to this really kind of like bitter, guilty, almost psychopathic character.
That scene
that fell out of nowhere.
after him and Rhaenyra have sex. they have that scene on the boat where Kristen comes out and he's like begging her to run away with him and start a life and leave everything behind, and he sounds insane. I could not understand at all where he was coming from there in any kind of way.
Especially since he's a member of the King's Guard. Like, he knows how things work.
And she is the heir. She is the heir apparent to the throne. He knows that that's not something that can happen. And he was so, like, hesitant to even get involved with that before anyway. Now he's like, fuck everything. Fuck my oath. Fuck everything. We'll run away. We'll go start a life. And that just seems so unlike the character they set up for him.
Yeah.
In the whole show.
And I think there's a few moments like that. But, yeah, it was like... So, I remember watching it. I made a mental note in, like, the second episode. I was going to mention it in this podcast. So, King Viserys, played by Paddy Considine. Yeah. I was going to make a point about how I think he was a weak aspect of the series. I thought that he was miscast early on. I thought that as a king, he had no screen presence. He had no aura about him like a king should have. Even though, like, that's not technically his character, he's a bit, maybe that's the point. He's not really befitting of being a king. Yeah,
he's Viserys the peaceful. He's very,
But I found his character to be a bit lame. I thought some of the acting from him was a little weak compared to some of the other cast members. And then I was just completely wrong because he ended up probably giving the best performance of the entire series, and I truly think that he got better as Viserys deteriorated.
Yeah, the more body parts he lost, the better his performance became.
Yeah, but let's talk about that. So I think I'm pretty sure it's leprosy that he had. Like,
no,
it's
he's
not
just got throne disease. That's what
it's not like explicitly mentioned, like, obviously, because given the time frame, like, they wouldn't know what leprosy was.
Yeah.
And it is fiction anyway, but I'm pretty sure it's leprosy. And like, it starts off like in the first episode, he like mentions that it's just a cut that's not healing, that he got cut from the throne, and that's like a sign of bad luck, that he's unbefitting of being king. But like, he kind of just has some like messed up skin, and then it progressively gets worse.
It gets fucked. It gets so bad.
And then episode 8, when we get that reveal, when he takes off the mask, like, I've never felt like, I felt just so sad for him. Like it was heartbreaking to see someone deteriorate to like that point. And he was a character that just really won me over, because I wasn't really a big fan of him in the first few episodes.
Me either. I thought he was an idiot. I actually thought he was genuinely stupid. Yeah,
straight up. And like the way he handled things with like the conflict with Daemon and all of that kind of thing, I thought, this is a weak aspect of the show, but no, they really resurrected that. And it was completely tragic. Like that scene where he walks to the throne.
Oh my god.
Like chills watching that. It was heartbreaking. Like my heart sunk watching that for him. Like I felt so much empathy towards him, and then also the dinner scene as well. Like, yeah,
those two scenes probably my favorite moments in the show.
Yeah,
honestly,
for me, like, I totally agree, and I think that his character, for me, like, even though it started off a bit weak, was one of the highlights of the show for me.
Viserys was he's quite a pacifist character. Like, he doesn't want to fight. He wants everything to be peaceful. He wants everyone to get along, and that extends to his family as well, but the entire realm. And at the beginning, you can kind of see that and how he's acting, and kind of take it as like, oh, this is so silly. Like, why is he doing that? Because it's so different from Game of Thrones, where you got everyone with their own interests and wanting to be cunning. You don't really get someone who's a big, like, wants peace in the realm. And as it goes on and stuff keeps happening, he gets thrown more into it. And by the time he gets to that point in the final episode where he himself is on death's door, he is... Why do we even have to have this whole conversation about who is going to succeed? It's already decided. Why is there so much infighting? Can we just leave it alone? That's what he wants. That's how he's always been throughout his whole life. And I loved that it really came into it. Like, you really start to empathize with that as it gets into it in the season. Like, it starts off really, like, weird. Like, that's weird kind of behavior. later episodes, his final episodes, it makes so much sense for his character, and you really feel it because you feel everyone else and how they've been fighting.
He holds the show together.
Absolutely, he's the glue.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think too, like the disease that he has kind of acts as like a metaphor of the toll being king is taking on him. I think so. Like as he deteriorates, I think he becomes a better king with age as well. But as he physically deteriorates, it's kind of like the pressure and the stress of trying to keep everything together is just withering him down to what he ends up becoming. I thought that was a really beautiful metaphor, and Paddy Considine, like, yeah, give him the Emmy because
he did so well. That final episode for him was so perfect, so beautiful. The end happened, and I was like, wow, that's I don't need to see any more from him. That's the perfect moment for him to be done with the show. And I was expecting him to die like every episode. Every episode he was like,
he just kept hanging on.
Yeah, I was like, he's definitely gone. After that wedding scene where he like collapses, I was like, well, we're not seeing him again. He'll just be off screen next episode. He died.
It's amazing what King's health insurance can do for you.
Well, look at him though, like compared to the kings and queens that we got to see in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Right? Who do we have? We started off with Robert Baratheon, relatively peaceful, but a really bad king.
Yeah. Like
really, really bad. He's a great warrior, bad king.
Yeah.
And then it just goes downhill from there, you know? Like we get Joffrey, absolute madman, absolute monster, and every time he was on screen, people would throw tomatoes at their screen. And Tommen was fine. He was kind of peaceful.
Tommen was just manipulated by Cersei, so
he was way too young. He was getting manipulated by his first scene after Joffrey dies. Tywin's trying to manipulate him.
Yeah,
and I think he actually would have benefited from that a bit more. He might have been a bit of a stronger king.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then Cersei after that. Fucked. Oh my god.
Yep.
And then Dany.
Yep.
Eventually, sorry, spoilers for Game of Thrones. But that was a nightmare. I don't even want to get into that. But those are the kings and queens of Westeros that we've seen in the past.
Completely different.
So that contrast to Viserys was so nice to see.
Yeah, and some nice like gender role kind of commentary with the character Rhaenyra as well. I do like the way they handled that better in House of the Dragon than Game of Thrones. I think Game of Thrones, it was not overly executed well. I think Arya was probably the better female character, but some of the stuff they did with Sansa towards the later seasons, like, kind of butchered her character while trying to make her like a strong female character.
It was unfortunate.
Dany as well, like they completely fucked her character. But Rhaenyra, like I love how in the beginning she's like this naive, you know, curious young girl,
kind of carefree almost.
And she doesn't really like want to be a part of it, kind of thing. And I like how she mentions like her worst fear is like having to be like a baby maker for some man, and then we get that time skip and she's literally giving birth in her first scene. And I thought how she kind of like grew to accept her role in the world and like the responsibility of like what she needs to do as a woman without actually having that take over her character. You know, like she's still a strong individual character while being a mother, while giving birth and doing her duty to provide heirs, right? Which is the whole point of royalty. So
well, you see that too. You really see her come into accepting her role. And I think it happens earlier on in the series, in the season, where she comes to accept that she has to get married.
Yep. And I love the way that was handled too by marrying, I forget his name, but Laenor, the sea snake.
Laenor Velaryon.
Velaryon, yeah, I like the way they handled, you know, her making that kind of arrangement. Like it seemed very befitting of her character.
That was very modern for this kind of medieval fantasy show.
Yeah.
And I wish we got to see more of that as well. Something that we lost in the time skip was their relationship and how they kind of grew together. He was kind of very brushed over as a character. Yeah.
Unfortunate, but that was the direction they decided to take. But she was fantastic. Both Millie and Emma were incredible. Like they were so similar with the way they portrayed it. Like there was just that natural maturity as she got older as well. And I liked her character arc, and I think she's a fantastic female actress. Like both of them, and a strong female character in general. I do like how, you know, they're playing into, you know, all the men trying to tell her what to do, but she's standing on her own 2 feet.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that kind of aspect, and I also like the whole conflict with when she got named as the heir, and that being like a whole problematic thing back then. Yeah,
you've got as well with that kind of whole heir side story is the heir before Rhaenyra was Daemon.
Yeah,
but Viserys never trusted him to be heir at all.
Yeah, and he didn't want it.
Yeah. What? Well, you could
I
argue
don't think he did personally. That's my interpretation.
Okay.
I think that he did. I think that's pretty clear by the end that he doesn't want it. He wants some aspects of that power, but you know, he's pretty kind of reluctant for that title. You know.
Yeah. His desires, I think, in a lot of ways are a bit enigmatic. And George R. R. Martin has said that he likes his grey characters.
Yeah.
And Daemon definitely fits into that mold for kind of grey character, where you're not sure really what he's kind of doing or where he's going. But what you were saying about Rhaenyra, about Millie Alcock and Emma D'Arcy, I have to say I think I probably preferred Millie Alcock's Rhaenyra just a little bit more. Maybe it's because we came into the show with her, and I was really unsure after the time skip of how Emma was going to do with her, and I really wasn't super sure. She felt different in some ways, but she did really come into it by that 10th episode, that final scene.
She's very good.
Fuck yeah, Rhaenyra, let's do it, you know?
Yeah. And definitely a very well written character.
Oh, for sure.
I think no surprise that she's become so beloved already in such a short amount of time. But let's talk about Daemon.
Let's talk about Daemon.
Daemon is probably the most interesting character.
I'd say so.
Of the entire series, and he's kind of tricky to put your finger on.
To summarize.
Yeah, because one episode he's the fucking antagonist of the entire show, and then the next episode he's like everyone's best friend again.
He's problematic. He's a problematic boy.
He is a loose goose. He is absolutely a loose goose. Like one scene he's trying to fuck his niece. Next scene he's killing his wife. Scene after that he's a loving family man. He flip-flops a lot, and I do like his character because you never really know
what to expect.
Exactly. Yeah. He's unpredictable. I genuinely thought he was going to be the main antagonist of the entire series.
Me too.
When he turned against Viserys.
Yeah.
And then the fact when he came back in and he was forgiven, I really liked that aspect, and it showed a lot of he's not just a crazy kind of character. There's a bit of method to his madness.
Well, they set it up that way. When he comes into that throne room wearing that crown.
Yep.
That driftwood crown. You have no idea what to expect. Is he here to challenge? Is he here to piss on Viserys some more? But no, he's there to be subservient after everything that we've seen. And I don't think that he had... I can't work out his intentions for doing that. Because I always thought it was because what we see in that episode is him trying to get ends with Rhaenyra.
Yep.
Which seems like a plot. He's going to do that. He's going to...
And when he confesses to sleeping with her to Viserys, even though that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Just to fuck with him a bit. There's lots of interesting decisions like that. And
I thought that was some greater plot, but it just kind of seemed like he was wilding.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to... In the same episode, he comes in, gets forgiven, apologizes for all that he's done.
It happens quick.
Then almost fucks his brother's daughter, and crawls into the throne room, gets kicked around by Viserys, and just wildly laughs.
Yeah.
Insane. And
it's funny too because he loses a spar in the first episode, he's fighting
Kristen.
Kristen, and he loses, and I thought, so they're gonna set him up to be this guy who's all bark no bite kind of thing, and then a few episodes later he's fucking up some crab people.
Oh my god, that was a sequence
that was super impressive, and the way it's a weird kind of thing to comment on, but the way he acted during that action sequence on the beach, just the way he ran and his posture and everything like that, it was really well done. He looked fucking badass.
Yeah. Well, you got as well, he didn't have the same levels of plot armor that they showed in later seasons of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
He avoided some of the arrows that were thrown at him, but you could really tell that he was struggling but really skilled.
Yeah.
A really skilled fighter.
That sold me on his character because if he was just one of those I'm a rich prince kind of thing, but I kind of suck at fighting, but I'm a badass even though I don't have actually anything to back it up, but he showed that he can fucking back it up. He's like,
he can hold his own.
Exactly, he's a skilled warrior.
His decision to go and do that in that point was kind of wild, you know. So he's been out there fighting in the step zones for ages, and it is a losing battle.
Yeah,
the Valyrian's him. He's not doing well, and then Viserys offers help. He sends an emissary, and he's like, "Look, we're going to send you ships. We're going to help you out." And he just snaps. He's like, "I'm not so small that I will need your help."
Yeah,
and he goes, "I'll fucking take them all on my own. I'll do it."
A great little brother moment, I think, as a character, and
it tells you a lot about their relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And their relationship, genuinely one of the most interesting relationships of the entire show.
Agreed.
That scene where he fucking helps Viserys, like he picks up his crown, like nearly cried during that. Like it was so beautiful because they had like so much conflict in the earlier episodes, and
someone literally says he's like suggests that Daemon's gonna kill Viserys and steal his crown, and that's an actual line. Like I think Viserys says that you would suggest that he's going to stab me in the back and steal my crown, and to see him pick that up off the ground, off his like decrepit brother, and put it back on his head, beautiful moment. Yeah,
and they genuinely love each other, like right to the end. You know, there's that mutual respect, even though they're very different characters. I really, really enjoyed that whole dynamic.
And they're not without the differences. They've had their problems,
like all brothers do.
But you can tell that they do care about each other in the end.
Yeah. Let's talk about Queen Alicent.
Alright.
So her character is kind of funny because morally, like, she's not too indifferent to Rhaenyra, right? Like, I think morally those two characters are probably on the same level.
Yeah.
But everyone fucking hates Queen Alicent, and everyone loves Rhaenyra. So
I think it's how they're done as well. In a lot of moments. Although I do have to say that episode 9, that penultimate episode where they just focus on the Greens and the Green camp, there's some really good moments in there. I wouldn't say it's a great episode because they do spend some time just literally running around.
Yeah.
But I do like the characterization, the world that she's set up, and what Alicent has to deal with. But as a character, I think, especially earlier on after the time skip, like in episode 6 and 7, you just don't like her.
Yeah.
They make her unlikable.
Look, she's not the most likable character, but I do love that contrast between her and Rhaenyra because they grow up together, and then, you know, it's like that...
best of friends. Like sisters, literally.
Like that typical story, like... you have a best friend, and then she marries your dad, and then becomes your mum. You know, like that age-old story. That's super relatable for everyone. But yeah, like I do like how, because she is genuinely like a good wife to Viserys. Like she cares for him all the way through.
She's dutiful.
Yeah, and even when he's fucking looking horrific, like she stood by him. You know, and obviously she had her own motivations behind that, but yeah, like she's definitely the antagonist of the show, which is kind of cool to see, like a female protagonist and antagonist.
Yeah.
I'd say at least by the end of season 1, that's where they stand. There's quite a few characters,
especially after Game of Thrones. It was like overpopulated with male characters. And that kind of world.
And I like the moments where, you know, like one scene she's trying to fucking kill Rhaenyra and poke out an eye of her children. And then, like, in episode 8, we have that nice moment where she makes a toast and, you know, it seems like all is forgiven in that moment. So, yeah, they're kind of, like, they went on 2 different paths, you know, but they still have that, like, moment where they had that close connection as children, you know, growing up. And although they've kind of lost that, it's still a factor.
Well, Alicent never wanted to be queen. You know, I don't think that's something she ever really had goals for, and her Otto really like forced her into it. Her father really forced her into doing it, I felt, and it probably made her a bit uncomfortable in, like, just because of the age gap difference, but also because it is her best friend's father.
Yeah,
and it definitely was a power grab from Otto to put his grandchildren on the Iron Throne. Like that's what it was, and she never really wanted to do it. And you can see all the way throughout it, up until the time skip, that she doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to be doing it. Probably until about the wedding scene, where she comes in wearing that green dress, that big like power moment for her.
Yep.
That's maybe when she comes into the role and accepts it for the first time and starts like fucking around with things. But yeah, she's wild in like 6, 7, 8, like probably 6, 7. And then those moments at the dinner scene in episode 8, where you've got Allison and Rhaenyra sharing subtle little looks that just kind of say everything they need about where they are in their lives and who they used to be, and it's heartbreaking. It's bittersweet, you know.
Yeah, and their relationship kind of serves as like the catalyst for the conflict of the entire show.
And then later, like in episodes 10 and 9, she's really like almost reserved in some way. She's like, I don't want this to happen. I don't want like Rhaenyra to, if we're going to do this, if this is what we're going to do, Rhaenyra cannot be harmed. She cannot hate me for this. And she's really trying for that. And she's the only one. She's the only one that cares.
That's true. What did you think about Otto Hightower?
Well, a lot of people earlier on compared him to Littlefinger, which I don't think is a fair comparison.
Not at all.
Yeah, Littlefinger's... I quite liked him in Game of Thrones,
especially
earlier on. Not so much later. They really fucked his character, as they did with everyone. But, you know, I don't think it's a fair comparison. Littlefinger was very cunning, very scheming, and kind of reminded me of like a cockroach. You know? Otto always... He's highborn, Lord of Old Town, was brother's lord, but he went to serve the hand, and he's been doing it for a long time. He's good at it, too. I think that he is quite good at advising Viserys, but he does have his own agenda, so he's just kind of tipping the scales. Not so much plotting and scheming, but just kind of trying to get his way.
Yeah, that's how I would describe him. Like, he's not even a bad character, like, in terms of, you know, morality, but he's just kind of serving his own agenda and trying to, like, make the things that he wants to happen using the power that he has as Hand of the King. But to be honest, I found his character to be a little bland. Yeah. I think that just the portrayal by Rhys Ifans, I think it is, like he's not giving like a bad performance or anything, but it's just kind of, you know, gravelly, monotone. Not a ton of personality there, but maybe we'll see him like really develop as a character moving into season 2.
I feel like the most expressive we see him is in episode 8, that dinner scene where he's like smiling and clapping his hands.
That was super weird.
The most range we see. It felt a bit weird to see. It's definitely because of how like reserved he was throughout the series. You know, that felt a little out of place, but it made that moment a bit more special.
Yeah, and another character, Laris Strong, is it?
Yeah, Laris Strong.
Yeah, the guy with long hair. That's
Quentin
a bit weird.
Tarantino.
Yeah, he's a weird dude.
They set him up really weird.
Yeah.
So he comes in like episode 3, I think, and they introduce all the Strongs except for Lord Strong, the second hand. And he's hanging out with all the women, like talking to the like Lannister women and stuff, and he seems like just a very kind-hearted kind of dude. Like that's the way they want you to see him as very early on. And we don't get much characterization for his brother, Harwin, which is unfortunate.
Don't even know who that is. Sorry.
So he's the guy that Rhaenyra had her kids with.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So he's the Australian actor. He was in Silver Sun. He was in Blue Water High.
Haven't seen him.
Wow, Jesus, wow.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Uncultured. But yeah, you barely got anything with him. They gave more characterization to Laris.
Which is problematic because I feel like he's the more important character, you know?
Well, not with how he ended up.
That's true.
Yeah. I don't know, Laris is a bit weird. He's more the Littlefinger character.
Yeah, absolutely, and I feel like he's going to be a huge player moving forward because he's already shown like what he's capable of.
Yeah.
And he has like not many morals, you know.
Don't exist for him.
Yeah, he killed his family midway through the season.
He wasn't even asked to do that. Allison hinted at something that she wanted, and he's like, "Well, I guess the way I can do that is probably killing my family."
Yeah, very strange relationship between those two as well. It's definitely a bit weird. I'm kind of interested to see where it goes.
It's very predatory. I think like you see the younger Allison like out by the weirwood tree in King's Landing, and he's just kind of hanging around, like slinking around the sidelines, and he moves in to like talk to her and start manipulating her very early on in her life. And that never stops. I feel bad for Allison because of that in some reasons.
That's fair.
You see Laris as well with his like little network of, he's got that like bug walking stick, and he starts like torturing the prisoners, cutting out their tongues.
That was fucked. Yeah,
and then putting his logo on them so that it's very
Yeah.
obvious who he belongs to, and using them as like his little minions and stuff. It's kind of a mix, I think, Laris, between Varys and Littlefinger.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Yeah, and I think he'll be a big player moving forward
in the wars to come.
Yeah,
I
think they set him up as like this character that's very strange and different, but I think we'll get used to him a bit more moving forward and like see what exactly else he's capable of.
I don't hate him, honestly. Like, even though he's done like a bunch of bad shit, I liked Lord Strong, I liked Harwin Strong. They were good characters. I know he killed them. I don't overly care, like I don't mind that much. The way he goes about, the way he does things, it's interesting to watch, it's entertaining, and I want to see what they do with him.
You just exposed yourself as a sociopath.
Sorry everyone.
Rhaenys.
Rhaenys.
Yeah, so look, her character, she's kind of like a mother figure for Rhaenyra, especially early on. Like, she's kind of like, I don't know really. You don't think so? You don't, like, there's that scene where she's kind of like, trying to tell her the way things work, I guess, on that balcony.
It didn't really feel like motherly to me though. Like, it was mentory in that kind of way.
Yeah, that's
where
probably
she,
a better word for it.
Sees like her position, but she wasn't kind-hearted with it at all. She was very like cold. I remember that scene being, she was quite standoffish with her.
I think they literally just made that decision though for her to be a bit cold like that, purely for that will she swap sides kind of thing, will she renege on her oath, which for me, like, her decision to back Rhaenyra wasn't a surprise for me, and I don't know why they built it up as such a big
they spent thing. All of episode 10 being like, will she, won't she, will she, won't she, and it's like she's just standing around doing nothing.
I felt like it was pretty obvious that she was always going to go down that path, but they really kind of leaned into that, like, she killed your son kind of
that's the conflict there. They still believe that her and Daemon killed Laenor, and kind of indirectly as well, Daemon killed Laenor, their daughter. So both their children, Corlys and Rhaenys' children, were gone, and all they've got left is the grandchildren, and two of them aren't even theirs. 3 of them aren't even their grandchildren.
True.
Yeah,
rough. But that scene in episode 10 where she comes bursting through the ground with the dragon.
That's the end of 9.
End of 9. That, look, I didn't love that.
I thought it was a cool moment, like as a bit of a shock, like kind of moment.
Fucked her character though. She killed just like hundreds of innocent people for no reason. And that was the thing. It was for no reason. If she said something on the back of the dragon, like, a threatening thing, or like you're going down a path, that you don't know what the consequences are going to be.
Okay, Obi-Wan.
Like, like you need to stop. Like, if she said something, or she fucking maybe killed someone that was important, right? Maybe it was warranted, but
it was unnecessary. She could have just waited for them all to leave and then left afterwards.
Yeah, and I think it would have been cooler if it was more so like a desperate last thing escape, because they kind of implied that like anyone who wasn't supporting the new king, they were getting like killed off, right?
And that probably would have happened to her.
Yeah, well, that was what they kind of implied, but they didn't even go develop that further. They just kind of had her escape via dragon before that ever became like a point of conflict.
But they take that tension away. So they have her held captive in the Red Keep, and they're like, you've got to make a decision, and you can choose what you want, but there's only one right answer.
Yeah.
And then Eric or Arik, I don't know, the twin Kingsguard brothers that are identical twins, and they have identical names apart from one letter. Can't tell them apart. Same hair length, same beard. One of them gets Rhaenys out.
Yeah.
And there's that kind of tension where they're running through the city trying to escape, but when they get separated, she's on her own. She's chilling. She can do whatever she wants. She could leave. She goes downstairs in the dragon pit, and she could just stay there. She literally could just wait for everyone to go. It might be a bit long.
Or go out like a different way, because surely there's another...
Surely the only way out of the dragon pit is not through the floor.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that whole sequence was kind of weak, to be honest.
Watching it, I think it was a cool, like, kind of shock moment, because that episode dragged a little. It was a bit of a slower episode, and it wasn't as entertaining as some of the other ones. So seeing that at the end, I was like, damn, I'm super keen for the next episode. Good kind of like cliffhanger teaser. But yeah, as a story decision, absolutely ridiculous. Insane that she chose to do that.
I think they were just trying, like, they were worried that she wasn't a cool enough character, so they tried to give her like her moment. but I think that detracted from her more than it helped her.
It didn't need to. You know, she's got a cool backstory. She was almost queen at that, that start of the series.
Yep.
Which was a bit weird as well, by the way, that kind of voiceover and that, like, flashback kind of thing to set up the gathering or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like, she was never going to get picked, but there was a chance, and that's an interesting character, like backstory to have. The almost queen, the would-be queen.
I think she'll be a pretty big character in season 2 as well. I think she'll be, like, really a big supporter of Rhaenyra. Like, they have a huge mutual respect for each other by the end of the first season. So.
Well, they've had similarities within their lives, so I think that she can see a little bit of herself in Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the children, the blonde children, because they're the more interesting ones.
The green children?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, so we'll start off with, I guess, Aegon or Aegon. Not too sure how it's pronounced, but...
I think it's Aegon.
Yeah. Like, they say Aegon, but it's spelled Aegon, so...
You get Maester Aemond, fuck, look at me, screwing up pronunciations. Maester Aemond in the original, in Game of Thrones, he, like, shortened Aegon down to Egg a lot, so I think maybe it's Aegon. Yeah.
Well, he's actually not a bad character. I like the fact that he's
person.
Yeah, well, that's fair. But he's just like a complete fucking screw up. Like he doesn't want to be king
at all.
At all. He's so disinterested in everything. He just wants to, like, live his own life, jerk off on fucking windows, overlooking the city, raping the slaves that they have, the servant, like...
And watching children fight.
And
making bastard children all over the city.
He just wants to have fun, you know? He doesn't really want any kind of responsibility. And the fact that his mom just, like... There's a couple of scenes where Alicent is just like... You need to be fucking better, you know?
She's trying, man. She's really trying.
And he's just such a fucking idiot. But then when he finally becomes king, and like again, he still doesn't want it, but that moment where he, like, puts on the crown, and
up until people start cheering for him, he's like,
oh, this shit isn't too bad. Like, I think he's gonna be a terrible king.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
Yeah,
you know, he doesn't want it. He shouldn't. Like, he's not the choice at all. It's just because he is the eldest son. It's really, really bad. It's like a Joffrey situation almost. He just, like, kind of falls into it and gets it, and they all put him on the throne. Like, Aemond says it as well. He's the one who studies histories, philosophies. He's the better fighter. He's the... he should be king. I wanted him to be king in that episode. There's that bit in episode 9 where he's holding Aegon and he's like, just let me go. I'll find a ship and I'll never come back. You can be king. I don't want it. And then Eric or Kristen or whoever was there, the Kingsguard, comes in and brings him back. I really wanted him to let him go in that moment. I was like, go, just get out of here.
It's kind of a sympathetic character in that regard, I think, as well. You know, he's just kind of, like, forced into a life that he doesn't want.
I don't know. Like, they really make it hard to be sympathetic for him.
He's not a good dude, but, like, you know, if he could just be left to do what he wants to do, then he would do less bad things, I think.
You should probably kill him. He probably shouldn't be left to his own devices. Let's be real.
You know, that's fair. I find it kind of weird, though, how during, like, the 2 time skips, like, before, he looked significantly older than the other siblings. And then the time skip happened, and he looked like the youngest.
He did. He had the shorter hair. His face looked more baby face. And Aemond looked 45. 45-year-old man.
He aged like 30 years in 6 or whatever it was.
But he was he looked younger as the kid as well. Obviously, that makes sense. But yeah, when they age up,
he played totally like different. The wimpy kid, you know, that was like a bit spoiled and. You
know, why don't I have a dragon?
Yeah, but also like a tad sympathetic because he got bullied a bit.
Yeah.
Like and then. He's a fucking
Chad.
Old dude, with a thick fucking jawline.
And a sexy eye patch.
Yeah, look, his character is certainly one of the most interesting, and I think the way season 1 ends is huge. Like, he's the one that fucked up, you know? Like,
he's the not the inciting incident, I guess, but he's going to be the cause of a lot of fucked up stuff.
And he's a fucking sociopath, right? He's got some problems with him. I don't know what Alicent was doing during the pregnancy, but
milk of the puppy.
Yeah, too much of that apparently. Because, you know, he's not fully right in the head. But I fucking loved that that scene in episode 10, like with him, like
Yeah.
him being there at the Baratheon place
At Storm's End, yeah.
waiting, and he's just got so much fucking, like, I guess it's charisma and screen presence.
He's got a presence, for
exactly.
sure. Yeah, I love it. I love when he's on screen.
Yeah.
The way he is portrayed, his actor, I think Ewan someone, I can't quite remember.
I'm not too sure.
But he does such a good job. I love listening to him speak, the way he, like his voice and everything that he does. He's a joy to watch on screen, even though he does some questionable things.
Yeah, he is a cool antagonist moving
For
forward.
sure.
I feel like he's like Damon's long lost child.
Well, they set him up. You
Yeah.
know, they've got that scene in episode 8. They've got that stare down between Damon and Aemon. It's like, bruh, here we go.
Before we move on too much, though, I do want to mention the writing. It's something we kind of glossed over a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know this, but the George R. R. novel, doesn't have dialogue.
Yeah, no. So it's told from like a maester's perspective of the events. Yeah.
And for me, Game of Thrones was at its best when it was adapting that George R. R. Martin dialogue. I think out of everything, like, he does that incredibly well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he does dialogue, fantasy dialogue at least, better than anyone else has ever done it before, right? And when we strayed away from the books and lost that source material, the dialogue fucking plummeted in the later seasons of Game of Thrones.
Absolutely. It just became cock jokes.
Yeah, so heading into this, like, considering that there's no dialogue, it shows. I think there's a lot of scenes where, like, some of, like, I won't say the dialogue's bad, it's absolutely not bad, but we get that moment where it's like some of the dialogue sounds very wooden, it sounds very fake, it's kind of like a bad kind of Shakespeare ripoff at times, like the way they speak. And then there's other times where it's super riveting and really well done, but I think
it's not consistent.
Yeah, I think Viserys in particular, like, part of the problem I had with his performance in the earlier episodes is probably more so down to, like, the dialogue that he had, and some of it was just a bit weak, and some of the interaction. Yeah, like, in general, like, compare Game of Thrones in terms of dialogue and writing from that aspect to this, it's no contest. Like, Game of Thrones murders House of the Dragon in terms
for sure.
of
I
written
agree
quality.
with that. Like, earlier bits, specifically, I'm thinking about episode 1 or 2, where you've got, like, Ned and Robert on the King's Road.
Yeah.
Just that little conversation they have, they cover so much in that.
Yes.
It's honestly masterful. And there's nothing overly like that in House of the Dragon. There's nothing that really...
There's no dialogue that's, like, that carries the scene. Like, in Game of Thrones, you have scenes that are carried purely by dialogue.
Yeah.
Littlefinger, like, pretty much every fucking scene he's in is just masterful. Tyrion as well.
Yeah.
Tywin Lannister. Like, every fucking line is
beautiful,
brilliant, and it's entertainment through dialogue. That doesn't exist here. There's good dialogue and there's okay dialogue.
Good lines does not equate to, like, a good
like the
scene. Yeah.
Like, name one scene from House of the Dragon that's just like a masterclass of dialogue.
I can't.
Genuinely, and that's probably one of the weakest aspects of the show, because they don't have that George R. R. Martin dialogue to fall on.
But I also think that to like counter that, as devil's advocate you there, they didn't have that to work with, and it is like a super big downside. But what they've done is really creative with it. They've taken this book, which is just a retelling of events, like a historic novel basically, and they've created this whole world around it, and they've put in their own dialogue that is good. It's good from nothing, you know. Comparing it to George R. R. Martin's dialogue, which he wrote over years in the books, is not a fair.
It's an unfair comparison, but it's still a comparison that's worth making, because naturally these two shows are going to be compared, and I think it's just worth pointing out through the source material that Game of Thrones is a superior show in terms of written dialogue. But that's not to say that House of the Dragon has bad writing. Like, I've certainly seen worse. The Witcher, for example. Like, I know a lot of people love that show, but I think the dialogue in that's terrible.
Look, I really enjoyed The Witcher season 1, but season 2 was just rubbish.
Yeah.
Rubbish.
But House of the Dragon overall, like, the writing quality is a little inconsistent.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the technical elements, because this is, you know, as we talked about, higher budget, and higher budget means generally more technically impressive. So let's start with the visual effects. What did you think of them?
They look great. So specifically with the dragons, they have done such a better job in House of the Dragon compared to Game of Thrones. I'm not talking about how they look just visually, like with the VFX. I'm talking about the design.
Yeah, they differentiated them.
And I appreciate it so much. I can actually tell them apart now.
There's different colours, there's different
shapes,
sizes. Yeah, like long necks, short necks.
Oh, Caraxes, that bloodworm, Daemon's dragon, looks so cool.
Yeah.
Super scary. That really, really long neck that shows like some kind of dragon, like they can have deformities as well.
Yeah.
Like it's super cool.
Yep.
Then you've got like the little ones, like Arax and Vermax. They're like little kind of like gecko dragons almost.
Yeah.
And Vhagar, massive.
Granny Vhagar.
Looks thousands of years old.
Yeah.
Got hair coming off her everywhere. She's like opening her eyes with like labored, like kind of like she moves around like she's like a bit labored. Not in episode 10, but earlier on it kind of like she just wants to sleep and chill out. And it's they look so good. They look super impressive.
Yeah, and well, the VFX across the board was fantastic. Another thing I really appreciated were the practical effects, like when that guy's tongue is cut off. Fantastic. When one of the sea snake guys gets his head cut off.
Oh, Vaemond, yeah.
Yeah. So like, generally, slice off the head. You know, you see the decapitation at the neck.
Yeah, it's a classic way to do it.
This time they split the face in half, and I really enjoyed that.
It looked beautiful.
It did,
It was shocking, and it looked really good.
Generally, like when they do that kind of thing, it looks so sloppily fake. You know, like it slides off, and you're like, ugh, like that looks fucking.
Or they do the cut like first, like they do the blade slash, and then it like kind of drips off a little bit or something, like comical kind of one.
Yeah,
this looked great
and
realistic.
They nailed it. Yeah, and a lot of the other like bits and pieces, like the makeup. Let's talk about the makeup. Genuinely, I don't think I've seen a show or movie with better makeup than season 1 of House of the Dragon.
Well, it just seems very like naturalistic a lot of the times in certain areas.
Yeah, well, like you have like the hair and makeup and costumes, which for a show like this, like a fantasy show, it's more important, and like the costumes across the board are fantastic. It matches Game of Thrones, and in fact, I think surpasses it in many regards to with all of the different costumes that they have and the different hairstyles, like Rhaenyra, how she has her hair, and all of those kinds of aspects. But the makeup in terms of like the crab woman.
Oh, yeah.
That looked
the
fucking...
crab feeder and shit.
Yeah, like that looks so incredibly realistic.
You know, I almost completely forgot about it. That was so early on.
Kind of a random subplot, but it was somewhat important and it was entertaining, but so much happens, it's easy to forget. But the makeup for that crab chick looked fantastic. Like the crabs feasting away on the people as well. Like all of the wounds and stuff look super realistic.
Super
like
gross.
the eye as well, like seeing it sliced.
That crab feeder dude, he
I think it's a chick.
I think it's a dude.
I might be wrong. Like it's a bit hard to tell, to be fair.
I'll die on a hill for this.
Okay.
I think it's a dude.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he was. Some people were saying he was wearing like a mask of the Sons of the Harpy, which is something from Game of Thrones, which is super random out of place.
Don't think so.
But specifically about like the makeup for that.
Yeah.
He's supposed to have grayscale, like that same kind of disease that Jorah had. That all of the people that end up on Old Valyria, like the horrible like they get like demonic and stuff and all.
I just figured that it was like the mom was a crab and the dad was a human.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. But also like Viserys' makeup.
Yeah.
That like when he takes off that mask and reveals like the half of his face that's just been fucking eaten away. Genuinely, I don't think I've seen better makeup than
Did
that.
they blend visual effects with that? Like they would have had to. For
I think so.
Yeah.
But it was mostly practical. Like I've seen some behind the scenes of it, and like.
Well, they aged that poor man up ridiculously all the time.
Yeah, it was seriously impressive.
Like you said before, I think they could have done a bit more for some of the other characters.
Yeah, like aging them a bit. Yeah, like
even just slightly, like a few grey hairs everywhere, or like a little bit of aging around the eyes or something.
That's fair.
Could have been a bit better. Maybe they did do it subtly, and we didn't notice it as much. We didn't spend as much time with those characters. But like when you have it with Viserys, you notice it a lot more.
Yeah, I think too. Like they probably just should have. Like I don't know, because you have such a jarring age difference, like with that transition. and then the other characters who don't have that, they remain the same. Maybe they could have done a bit more with like performance or like some stuff that's like happened off screen. Like for example, maybe Kristen Cole could have like a bit of a limp, or something like that.
Battle wound
something to imply that like time has passed and he's aging as a warrior or something.
No, he's just immortal.
Straight up.
There's a lot of moments as well, like specifically around like the city, like of King's Landing itself, that feels so different from later seasons of Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the complaints I see a lot about like season 7, season 8 of Game of Thrones is they lose all of the grunginess of King's Landing.
Yep.
Like all the people are just dressed in kind of like bright kind of colours every now and again. They all look relatively clean compared to earlier Game of Thrones seasons where they're all like covered in shit and wearing, some people are wearing nothing and they all look a bit different. That when you see all the characters in episode 9 all being like, all the citizens of King's Landing being shoved in the dragon's pit, they all look like they should. You know, you've got your flea bottom people, you've got your higher ups and everything, and they really differentiate between that. And it feels a lot better than it did in Game of Thrones. In episode 1 as well, we have the tourney scene, the big tourney, and when you compare that to the budget of Game of Thrones season 1, where they have their like
the same thing,
you've got like the production value like is so different. Obviously it's the Targaryens at the height of their power, but you've got the biggest city in the world and they still have the money. Like it's whole of Westeros, massive city. Tourney in Game of Thrones season 1 was a couple of twigs in a dirt patch with some sticks and shit to like prop up the lords, and this was a massive arena, massive arena with so many people watching and massive stone stands for all the lords. It was such a interesting contrast with that kind of that practical and that visual effects.
And shout out to Damon's hair. Never seen so perfectly slicked back straight hair in my life. I know it's a wig, but
I don't think it was at one point. When he had it cut short, that looks very like Matt Smith hair. You know, it looks like very like how he did in Doctor Who, with this kind of like side kind of part where it goes down. I think that was his natural hair, maybe just coloured, but it's all a wig and everything else. I think that it's weird that they started off with him having long hair, then he cuts his hair, then they go back to him having long hair as well. I wish they kind of like...
I'm all for any hair that he has. It looks fantastic. But yeah, the cinematography as well. Like this show is incredibly well shot. Very, very good. I think it's not better than Game of Thrones, but on par. Like I think both of those, like even season 8 of Game of Thrones, the cinematography at times kind of carried it. Obviously, you have like the whole like you can't see shit during the Battle of the Night.
Well, that was a complaint with House of the Dragon too.
I personally didn't find it to be a problem.
Me either. I didn't find it to be a massive issue.
But yeah, even like season 8, the cinematography was really carrying, like that cool shot with Dany and the dragon behind her, like those kinds of things.
Oh, in that last episode, even in the Battle of Winterfell, like some of the visual things they did with the dragons in the sky, like up against the moon, and like coming down through the clouds and stuff. Beautiful visual moments.
And this show is the same. Like it does those spectacles really well. I like the way they shoot action sequences. You know, it's not too like hard and fast cutting. We get to actually see it unfold and stuff. Would have liked to have seen a bit more action. In general, like a lot of it is kind of like dipping their toe in the water. There weren't really too many like one-on-one sword fights or anything like that.
They're saving it.
Of course, we can imagine. But
especially with Miguel.
The dragon sequences, though, are all really well shot. Like
really well done. Episode 10.
Yeah, that sequence, flawlessly shot. Like, so it starts off where, you know, Luke, he arrives
at Storm's
End, and we see the dragon, and from there we're like, oh no. Then
you see Vhagar up on the battlements, and you're like, shit.
Then we head in, and we've got aim on them. We're like, oh no. And then he wants the eye, and then they're like, no, like we're not letting you fucking spill his blood in here. And then he goes on the dragon, and we're like, oh no. And then he's flying through, and then we have that tense kind of chase scene, right? And then there's that moment where he flies between the cliffs, and we think, okay, he's made it.
He's done.
He's fucking got out of there.
Away.
And then nope, the fucking cliff bit ends, and then he surprise attacks the fucking Granny dragon.
So Arax really kind of, it's fight or flight for him in that moment. They're dragons, they're subservient to their riders.
Yeah.
But they obviously have a mind of their own, they have personalities of their own. You can really see that a bit more in this than Game of Thrones as well. But he just goes off on his own. He's like, yeah, I'll blast him with the fire.
Yeah.
Bad move. Oh no.
Yep. Definitely. And I think there's a cool line too, I think that Viserys says, where it's like, the Targaryens controlling their dragons is a bit of like a myth, you know?
Yeah. Like it's a power that we should never have toyed with or something.
Yeah, like it's kind of implied that like although they do have control over their dragons, they're still independent beings, you know, they're not like fucking slaves, and they will do erratic things, which ends up happening. And yeah.
What did Aemon think was going to happen? He's taking a 1,000-year-old dragon up into the sky on a hunt, and he's expecting them not to kill him?
Yeah. Well, look, he fucked up. He made a mistake, and I think it's a pretty big one for the context of the show, but just the way that sequence was shot was really well done.
That moment there as well, at the end, where you see Aemon kind of realize what's happened.
Yep.
Beautiful acting moment
yep.
from you in there. That was really, really good. I was like, oh shit.
Both
he really didn't mean to do that.
Both he and Matt Smith were very expressive with their like subtlety.
Absolutely.
Like they can say a lot just by doing fucking nothing, which is the best kind of acting in my opinion. So
agreed.
But yeah, and just the cinematography in general, like really, really strong across the board. Like you know what to expect watching a Game of Thrones, and the production value here I think is on par, if not maybe better than Game of Thrones in some aspects. I won't say better because we haven't really seen enough of a sample size to judge that, but at the moment like there's no like degradation to what we've seen in Game of Thrones.
I wouldn't say that it's better either. I think some of the wide shots are beautiful. I think what they do with the lighting is incredible, but yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say there's anything that's been completely amazingly outstanding in terms of cinematography for me.
Yeah, there's some nice moments too with the editing. Like they edit a birth scene with like a fight scene.
Oh yeah.
That was really impressive and
really haunting birth scenes in this whole show. Every time there's a childbirth, I'm like, nah.
Genuinely, if I was a woman, I don't think I would ever want to have children after watching this show. It's terrifying. Yeah. Obviously, like modern medicine exists, thank God, but yeah, like it's rough. It's really rough. Absolutely terrifying. Like seeing the stillborn baby.
In episode 10,
that was
pulls it out.
Yeah, that was tough.
A lot.
That was tough to watch.
Yeah.
And then the C-section in episode 1.
A lot of people talking about that when it first like came out. It was like bold and that kind of like violent kind of. It wasn't violent necessarily, but that was a bit gratuitous. And it really worked.
It needed to be.
Yeah.
It needed to be because Viserys is a good character who had to make a bad decision because it was the right thing to do, if that makes sense. Like the right thing to do, because he'd been trying and he needed a fucking male heir, right? And she was not providing one for him. So he took the chance, and look, it didn't fucking work out, but it was probably a decision he needed to make. But
he really loved her, you know, like
genuinely.
He there was a really hard decision for him to make, and you can see in almost all the episodes after that point him really regretting that decision.
Yeah, when he's kind of pushing that responsibility on Rhaenyra, we kind of see that like he's walking the walk, you know, like he's saying you need to accept your place as the princess.
Yeah.
And he's kind of followed that, like you need to provide heirs. That's your responsibility after he's, you know, kind of gone through that.
Although I do think Viserys is a little bit more forward thinking than some of the other characters in the show.
It's true.
Specifically Otto and maybe Jason Lannister.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
It's going to be cool to see like if there's going to be more focus on the Lannisters and maybe the Starks in season 2. It's kind of implied that they're setting that up.
Well, we saw a Stark early on. We obviously got a bit more with the Baratheons. There was some early on as well, but then we got the Lord of Storm's End. But we got a lot of Lannister stuff.
Yep.
With Jason being on the council, Tyrus, don't remember. So many names.
Too many characters. There's just simply too many characters.
A lot of characters they introduced over the years.
And the names are just too similar as well.
Yeah. Like, Laena, Laenor, Baela, Aemond, Aegon, Vaemond.
It's rough. There's like a meme where George R. R. Martin just like adds one letter to a name for a new character.
I saw another one that was like all the issues in House of the Dragon could have been avoided if they just named their kids not Aegon again.
But yeah, so let's move on. Favorite character for you in House of the Dragon?
Favorite character? That's like we just said. There's a lot of characters. I know. I think really early on, Daemon was like he's that bad boy, but he's really charismatic in that kind of way. I don't know, because you have like what you think about the characters and their journeys, and you have like who you enjoy seeing and who you want to see more of.
Yeah.
I'd probably say at this point in time, at the end of season 1, probably Aemon Targaryen. He's
interesting.
Got a lot that I think he can do. I think he's going to be super important in the wars, and I think he did have that kind of like not tragic backstory, but he was left out. You know, he was bullied by his own siblings and his cousins, and all he wanted was a dragon.
And he took matters into his own fucking hands.
He did.
You know,
he was a bit of a dick
life
about it. Like honestly, like
fair though.
Yeah.
You know, because they were dicks to him.
And now he's like, well, I've gone and done it. You know, and he ends up losing his eye, which I love a character with an eye scar. I just think it looks sick. He obviously,
and when he lost his eye too, like he didn't even give a fuck.
Yeah, no, he was like, it's fine, it's whatever, you know, it's just gonna be character building for me, and it was. But yeah, he does have sociopathic tendencies, but like I said, I do enjoy seeing him on screen. I enjoy hearing him speak and seeing him in scenes. When he showed up at Storm's End at the end, I was like, oh, here we go. I got chills just from him being there and anticipating what might happen. And I think I'm excited to see where he goes and what they do with his character, whether he does fuck things or whether he does like changes his personality or changes how he interacts. Not sure what's going to happen. Don't know any spoilers from the books at all. But very, very keen to see where they go with that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see his character arc because he didn't really have one. Like I guess he did in terms of the time skip, but that was just kind of natural through growing up. But they're kind of setting him up to be something. I'm interested to see whether they follow through with that and he ends up being that, which is totally fine. Or maybe they take him in a unique direction, you know, where he's maybe a bit more sympathetic or likable as a, you know.
Well, you see that moment in him, you see that he has those emotions when he kills Luke. He regrets that right away. The look on his face is super like, oh, what have I done? And you wonder where he might go.
Alicent is gonna fucking lose.
Oh my god, she's gonna flip. She's gonna flip.
That's it's like when you fuck up and like drop a plate and then you gotta go tell your mum.
Except your mum's the queen mother.
Yep, scary. I think for me, I have to go with Daemon. I know that's a bit of a basic bitch answer.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah, like I just think he has the coolest hair, and that's how I judge characters.
He's also got a really cool sword.
Oh, absolutely. His outfits in general, like in the pilot. That fucking it's so over the top, but it looks fucking awesome. Straight out of Skyrim. It's like some fucking special armor you get on a quest out of Skyrim.
He crafted that himself, you can almost tell.
But yeah, like he is the most interesting character for me. Like he changes so much. Like he flip-flops. He's villain in this, he's suave and likable in this. He's caring in this scene, and then he's back to being a bit of a fucking self-entitled prick, and like then he's fucking like by the end of it looks like he's gonna go off the rails. Like he genuinely just wants war. He wants to fight in war.
He doesn't care that Rhaenyra's giving birth. He doesn't care that she's in pain. He's just like, I'm preparing for war. They killed my brother. I'm gonna do it.
And we see that too. Like he genuinely cares for like Rhaenyra, but it's almost like he's got this internal struggle with himself where he has these like impulses, you know, and he's a very impulsive character, I would say, but he's impulsive with intelligence. And I think that's what makes him so interesting. He's not just like a mindless barbarian, you know. He's
just going around doing what he
wants. He's very thoughtful and like he had so many different like female partners throughout season 1. So but yeah, like I think he's one of the best characters. I especially love the comedy that comes out of him. Like some of his one-liners.
He brings a lot
to
it in the show.
I
love watching him on screen. I did love watching Daemon. I think obviously I love Matt Smith as an actor. Maybe not in Morbius, but other things. And he really he had a commanding presence throughout the whole show.
I don't think anyone else could play Daemon.
Yeah.
So I think that's a sign of like perfect casting.
Careful, they might recast him with Liam Hemsworth.
Rough.
Oh, let's not get into that right
Yeah.
now.
Moving on, what's your favorite episode of season 1?
Favorite episode? So much happened.
There's quite a few. I think there's some bad episodes, like, well, bland, average episodes.
Yeah.
Particularly earlier on.
I think episode 6 was weaker.
Yeah. Like, it's very jarring having to put up with that.
Straight after that time skip, and then trying to re-establish yourself with all these new characters, and not a lot happens in an episode. I saw the writers, they called that like a second pilot for them. Don't think it was at all.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Definitely didn't feel like that. I have to say probably my favorite episode probably was episode 8.
Yeah, we're in agreement there.
Yeah,
the Lord of the Tides.
Yeah.
Seriously, like, Paddy Considine carries.
He really did. He carried the whole episode. His early on performance with that kind of like that really dazed and out of it like old decrepit king is really good. Like you can super tell that he's like fucked up there.
And he nails like all of the tiny mannerisms, like the breathing, how he felt like it looked like he genuinely felt fucking exhausted on his last legs. And
that moment where he comes into the throne room and you've got Raman Djawadi's score playing over it, gives me chills thinking
about it. It's my favourite scene in the entire...
It's so good. It's so powerful. He has the most presence. It felt like they were building up to that the whole season. He comes in there, everyone stops, everyone's shocked. You don't expect him to either because of how you've seen him in this episode.
Powerful.
It's super powerful. And he, despite barely being able to walk or move, puts himself up on the throne. He's off his pain meds. He's ready to be a king again in this last moment. And immediately after that, you get the dinner scene, and that's really
beautiful
well done
moment.
as well. Takes off that mask, you see just how decrepit he is, just how old he's gotten, and the speech that he gives makes me feel like an idiot for saying that he was ever done. You know, he just wants his family to get along. He's been peaceful for his whole reign, and he knows that there are going to be conflicts after his death. He sees his own death coming, and he just wants everyone to try and get along. And he gets that in this last moment. I think that's beautiful. Yeah,
and his last breath as well, like the way that episode ends is fantastic. I think that episode would be up there in terms of like the Game of Thrones universe. I think that would probably be top 20, which is saying something because there's so many fantastic episodes from Game of Thrones. But I think it's the episode that really stands out that, like, these showrunners, they can craft a fantastic episode. Yeah, no, it was really, really good. Probably there's a lot of good moments, there's a lot of bad moments throughout the whole show, but absolutely I think Lord of the Tides was the highlight. Yeah, for definitely sure. That peak moment, definitely when he comes in the throne room, the whole ending with that, a little bit silly with the Allison thing, with the fucking up of the names and causing all that conflict. Yep. But I understand why they did it, and I'm not super mad about it because everything else in the episode was... It's a tad contrived, but makes sense, you know? Yeah. Like, he's kind of delusional at that point. Yeah, he's back on his pain meds at that point. Yeah. But still enough to remember Ama in that last moment. Yeah. And call that out to her. Really beautiful moment. Beautiful. Season 2, expectations. So, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, this season is basically set up. Yeah. This is just like Act 1, right? It sets everything up. Season 2, we're ready to go, right? What are the consequences of what happened with the death of Luke, right? The war is going to begin. That's kind of obvious because they set it up like, oh, will they, resort to peace after that happens? No way, it's not going to happen. Yeah, they kind of tease it. They like dangle it in front of you, and then as soon as that happens, and you get Rhaenyra turning around that final moment, it's established. War is on. War is coming. Yeah, I'm personally really keen to see the introduction of some new characters. Yeah. I think so many characters were kind of thrown at us that a lot of like the minor characters I can't even remember. Like I can't remember the Lannisters, for example. Because there's just so many. But season 2 gives us an opportunity now that we feel like comfortable and familiar with these main characters to explore some of these side characters a bit more often. like Laris, for example.
Love a bit more characterization with him.
Yeah,
that'd be good.
I'm keen to see some more stuff with him. Obviously, we have like Aegon as king. Very interested to see how that plays out. Very interested to see what the fuck Aemon's going to get up to.
Yeah, and the consequences of what happened with Luke and how people react to him and how he reacts to that.
How will Alicent react? You know, because I think, like, does she want peace? And if she does want peace, like, genuinely doesn't want war to happen.
Well,
what's she going to do to try and reconcile the fact that her son murdered Rhaenyra's son?
Yeah, like she was trying to avoid that the whole time, and even like forced Otto to go out there and try and make peace, and gave her that page from the book in the first episode.
Yeah, from their childhood.
Like she's showing that she's willing to try and come to some terms. She does not want her to die at all, but I think it's really going to depend on how Rhaenyra reacts.
Yeah,
she's not going to be happy. Flip. Yeah. And Daemon's going to be urging her on as well.
And we know like Daemon's influence over her is going to be like a whole focal point of the show, I think.
Yeah.
Playing into that kind of Targaryen, like they all have their inner crazy, I guess. Like
every time a Targaryen is born, they flip a coin.
Yeah, with Dany and stuff.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. It kind of sullies it knowing where it's going to end up slightly, you know?
Yeah.
Just thinking about that. Like even talking about expectations for season 2. Yeah, 172 years later, it's just going to be...
I'm super keen to see the relationship between Aegon and Queen Alicent, because I think he's going to go down his own way.
He doesn't listen to her. He's never listened to her.
Yeah, I think once he gets a bit of taste of power, it's going to be like Cersei trying to fucking control Joffrey.
Yeah.
It didn't fucking work, right? No one could control him. Tywin did his best, but I think we're going to kind of see it delve down that. Now, I'm interested to see too, personally, is there going to be a big time skip? Is season 2 just going to be like the immediate aftermath within like a few years of time span?
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they do it.
Or are we going to get like an immediate aftermath and then do another big time skip like 5 years later or something like that?
Yeah, well, I want to see if they keep that format that they've got, because the setup obviously needs to take place over a few different years.
Yeah.
But now that we're in the war, are they going to keep with that every few episodes, changing a few years and time skipping, or are they going to just keep it consistent from now on?
And I genuinely don't know what happens like with this war. I don't know how long it like lasts for.
Me either.
I know nothing about the books.
I looked up one spoiler about that dragon in episode 10, Vermithor, the one that Daemon sings to and tries to I guess tame in that way.
Strange scene.
Yeah, strange scene, but really cool. Beautiful singing from Matt Smith.
Yeah.
Amazing.
He does it all. Great hair, great singing voice.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think they'll probably... I feel like they'll have to keep it consistent from now on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm keen to see where they go in the first episode. Keen to see what Rhaenyra does and everyone else, of course. But her immediate reaction to that is something that was teased and cliffhanger for us. Keen for a trailer. Keen to see where they're going to go.
Only 2 years to go. All right, well, it's time for our final verdicts. So we'll start with you.
Don't start with me. Never start with me.
We start with you.
Oh,
we start with you. So I'm interested to hear, what would you rate House of the Dragon out of 100 or out of 10 if you prefer?
Mm-hmm.
And strengths and weaknesses to kind of summarize your overall thoughts on season 1.
Right. Well, obviously I watched it differently to you, like I said, like over that week-to-week period, and I really felt that cliffhanger at the end of every episode. I watched all of Game of Thrones in the time span to like satiate my thirst for it, so I really enjoyed it as a whole. Really good series, really well done season. Really excited to see what they do in the future. Overall, probably 86 out of 100.
86? I'm going to round that to 85 because that kind of bothers me.
Alright, it's like turning the volume up and putting it on 21.
Yeah, like this is an IGN, homie. Yeah, so that's a really high
I really
grade.
Enjoyed it. I really liked it. Like there were a lot of like amazing moments, a lot of powerful moments, but just the overall like excitement I got every Monday to sit down and watch. I watched it as soon as I could. Every Monday, as soon as I got home from work, I'd sit down and put it on.
Definitely has that binge aspect to it.
Yeah. I'm keen to watch it again and binge all of it, and I will probably a few times before season 2 comes out. But I don't think my opinion will change that much on it, because I did really enjoy the story, the characters, the time skipping I did think was a bit of a unique aspect as well. didn't love it as much. Obviously, we have our problems with it, but yeah, and that kind of just how it felt different from Game of Thrones in a lot of ways.
And it lived up to that expectation
Yeah.
that Game of Thrones has set.
Yeah, it wasn't like they could have done it and tried to make it different, and it'd be shit.
Yeah,
it,
like
you know?
this, like you mentioned, the Star Wars films. What
Yeah.
happened when Disney bought Star Wars, and we just saw like what they turned that franchise
Saw it all fall to
into.
shit. Yeah.
I was worried heading into this that the same thing could happen with House of the Dragon. They were just going to make spin-offs because they'll make money.
Exactly.
But no, the quality is
It's
here.
top tier. It's top. They've got the money. They've got the passion for it, I think. And as long as they don't drag it out too far, I think it has the potential overall as a series to be better than Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Well, my final verdict, bit different to yours. I'm going to give House of the Dragon a 70 out of 100, and genuinely lucky to get that, I think. Like I said, I think this season will age poorly. I think once we see future seasons, we'll look back on this and see like it was necessarily messy to get us to the point where we need to get to for the quality to take over. And I really hope that that's the case where season 2 and season 3 are like such
phenomenal.
Fucking insane level, because everything's set up, all they need to do is deliver. Right? And season 1, it was messy, it was rough, but if the rewards are reaped later on in the seasons, then we can accept that.
It'll be
but
worth it.
As an individual season, judging it right now, not knowing anything else that happens in the future, I have to say it's just too flawed for me to give it anything more than a 70.
Okay.
So like I mentioned, the writing is a huge problem for me. I think it's just not quite that quality that we get in Game of Thrones. Again, maybe not the fairest comparison, but just in general, even compared to just normal television shows, it's not quite that top tier quality to expect. The time skips, they're too jarring for me. They're too jarring to ignore.
Yeah, I do see how you think they can be detrimental.
And the problem is like, I was engaged throughout the show, but I wasn't on the edge of my seat for the entire thing. I have to say, like, the pacing's kind of weird because it moves so fucking fast. Like, they skip over so much and they just speed run through some important scenes.
Yeah.
But then there's also some scenes where literally nothing happens and they drag out.
Even,
yeah, like some episodes are super slow and we get like these scenes that just feel inconsequential to the overall story.
Yeah, it's like, why did they choose this moment over their like 6-year time skip to settle on so we can see?
I think 30% of season 1's cuttable. Genuinely, like a big chunk of it is not necessary. I understand like you need time for the characterization and stuff. I just think at times they maybe focused on the wrong kind of things, and again, I found it to be very jarring with the amount of characters we're introduced to and the fucking similar names. Like it's really hard as a viewer. Maybe rewatching this, like once I have like a grasp of what's happened in the characters now, so maybe rewatching it, I'll appreciate it more.
Yeah.
But upon that like first watch through, it's very difficult to kind of get into. That's not to say like I didn't enjoy the show. Like a 70 is still a positive score for me.
Yeah, it's still high. It's still up there. I can clearly tell just from talking to you about it. Like, you liked it.
Yeah, like I enjoyed it. There's some episodes that I think kind of suck, where not a lot happens and that kind of quality on a scene-to-scene basis just isn't there.
But even those episodes were better than 2 seasons of Game of Thrones.
That's not hard. Well, I did enjoy the shocking aspects, like, the things that kind of come out of nowhere. I just think the story at times was a little weak, and the writing was a little weak at times, but technically the show is really, really good, and I'm keen to see season 2, and that's really all the season 1 has to do.
Yeah, well, it was a setup. Like you said, they omitted like 40 years of the books like beforehand. So I think they had their end point that they wanted to end on at the end of season 1.
Yeah.
And they've gotten there now. So they're over that hurdle.
Yeah. And
where it goes from here, I think it's just going to pop off.
They're past the growing pains, and like all of the actors are really solid. The characters are strong. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what happens in season 2.
Same. Super keen.
But anyway, thank you so much for watching, everyone. This has been For the Record. I will see you in the next video.
Bye.